Really? Well, if you guys can hear me, I cannot. Yo, what's up? Can you guys hear me? Am I live? Is this thing on? What's up, guys? Well, I am wholeheartedly sorry about that. That was really weird. As soon as the stream went live, I just got a black screen in front of me and had to restart my whole computer, which that really sucks. And I was really panicked. I was like, great. Took last week off for no good reason, just because, I couldn't make it. I didn't have a good excuse or anything to take off last week. But I wasn't with you guys last week. After sort of setting up this whole new time slot on Thursdays for a show, and I'm like, nah, peace out. But I am back tonight. So thank you all for hanging with me during that little bit of a technical difficulty. What's up, Scott? What's up, E? What's up, Maddie? Hope you guys are getting ready for RVD. He's going to live a little later tonight. This is not the Rob you want, perhaps, but it's the Rob you got for right now. And in case you're new around here, in case I haven't seen you before, I am Rob. This is the Nocturnal Knockout, a Brass Ring Media podcast right here on our YouTube channel. How you guys doing? How's it been going over the last couple of weeks? I think I had to take a hiatus after my Dolphins got so thoroughly embarrassed-ish by the Bills on that Thursday night. I had to wait till we were coming off a positive AFC East win with of course, our best player tearing their ACL. I don't think my name's ever going to be spelled right. In fact, I think that might be my new name designation right there. I think legally I've got to change my name before my name actually changes over here. So I think that's like the order of operations that we're currently dealing with. Yeah, I seen your chats here, E, about HBK keeping Tony D off TV. your issues with the NXT invasion angle, much less issues than whole nations seem to have with that one. And the Kennedy podcast update. That's something I really, really have been missing, was the Kennedy podcast update, which my guy hasn't got to his subscriber count yet. I really, really want to know these stories. No, I give Shanahan all the credit in the world. Talk about a guy who does something with, like a MASH unit. Like last week, they couldn't get it done. And it's like, okay, that makes sense. But Shanahan does more with less, and usually has quite a bit. So I wouldn't say he's even a more than less kind of guy. More with less, but good God, that team is decimated by injuries. And we'll see him a little later tonight. If maybe you could have RVD and Winnier, you watch the game on the other side. But I just knocked over my camera because I'm on a very, very shaky table. Right now, this table, look at that. For those of you watching, it's like motion sickness on this table. If I sneeze one time, everything's just going to fall off and go to hell. So I really, really hope that doesn't happen. Speaking of things going to hell, I wanted to talk to you guys about something today, because we had the announcement that of Cena's final match, where the city was happening, the exact date it's happening on. And when I think of John Cena's last match, I'm sad. I really, really am. I'm sad, not because I'm going to miss John Cena so much. I was fully able to adjust to wrestling without John Cena over the last 5 to 7 years. I think most wrestling fans were. And in fact, if you actually look objectively, the business did better when he was away. That's not meant to be some hardcore criticism of Cena and his lack of drawing ability. I think if anything, if you want to criticize Cena's drawing ability, you can criticize the era in which he operated in, more so than any of his individual actions, although he's not completely blameless in that situation. But no, when I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about John Cena's last match, I get sad because all I can really think about is how badly they've wasted this run. Like, they have wasted this John Cena run, this final run, on a heel turn that just did nothing. And even as a babyface, you have to question some of the matchups that he's got going into it. And so it's just making me thinking of the opportunity that they had. Because here's the thing about opportunities. They're limited. They only happen for a limited time. There's rarely an opportunity that's going to be open eternally. That's a pretty rare thing. In fact, is asking who it's rumored to be. The Edge thing has me thinking it's Edge, especially with the recent reporting that came in on Edge, although the reporting from 2 weeks ago seemed to indicate that he was just filming a movie. I don't know. Last time, save for last night, that I was watching AEW, it sure as hell felt like Edge was piecing out. And if there was one perfect opponent on what they're doing is basically a John Cena nostalgia tour plus Logan Paul, I would say Edge is a perfect opponent. If not Edge, you need to put him against an actual current guy that you're going to do something with. We've seen in the past when you have like a Cena and Austin Theory, and that doesn't benefit anybody when Cena and Austin Theory face each other, because there was no real actual plans, even if Vince had him at the time, for Austin Theory. You need a Gunther. You need, although he's not really in the position in terms of where he is on the character, you would need someone like a Braun Breaker, someone of that ilk. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, how WWE is kind of looking for their next guy, who's going to be the guy, who could be a candidate. You have to sort of look at one of those guys, I think, for the final Cena opponent, unless you do Edge. After that, we've got AJ coming up. I don't know where the nostalgia would even figure it out. I did not see that, Ian. So it got me thinking, though, this whole John Cena run got me thinking in broader terms about, windows. And what I mean by windows is I want to take this into like kind of a sports perspective. So let me show you what I mean up here. So obviously, when you think of windows in wrestling, probably the first thing you think of is the barbershop window, the one that Marty went to. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the kind of windows that you can see if you're watching this on YouTube in the right corner of my screen. In fact, let me take myself completely off of it, and you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about. So check that out. So again, you have Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels breaking up on the left side. But if you look at the right side in the upper right-hand corner, look how young all these guys are. Look how healthy all their lower limbs are. Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Kevin Durant, and Stephen Curry. That's the 2017 Golden State Warriors. Most likely the most unstoppable force in basketball history. In the bottom right-hand corner, you see a collection of Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. One of the most disappointing collections of talent in NBA history. Now, why do I bring these up in relation to our windows, and what does any of this have to do with wrestling? I'm going to explain here in a second. If we take these guys if we take all this at a face value, that's a dumb way of saying that. I don't even know what I'm saying. Hold on one second. There we go. If we think about windows and we think about sports, we often think about championship windows. And the thing about a window, the reason why I think we call it a window is because what is the primary action of a window? Now, a window you tend to look through, but what does a window do? Well, a window closes. And you don't always know how long those windows are meant to be open. So you have to maximize the windows when they are open. If you're looking at that top right-hand corner, when you see those Golden State Warriors, they closed that window themselves. That window was as wide open as it could be from them. I mean, these guys almost won a title with 3 of the 4 guys like hurt. They almost beat Kawhi and the Raptors with that unit. You know, didn't quite have the permissible benefits coming in at that point. But while they were together in those 3 years together, they went to 3 NBA finals. They won 2 titles. It didn't last very long. It didn't last as long as it could have, and the absolute domination that team could have rolled out with. But I think you can say, outside of the 1 year where they literally didn't win it all, when they got to the title game or the finals and didn't win it all, they maximized that window. Meanwhile, you have the bottom right-hand corner, another great collection of talent. A collection of talent that you thought may win a couple of titles. And if it wasn't for Kevin Durant's peaky toe, they might have won a title in 2021. Nonetheless, this window, which everyone thought would be a championship window, ended up being very short, marred by injuries, feuds with the coaches, all of Kyrie-ness. We were stuck with all that. And therefore, you had a pretty small window. So what I want to do now, taking that from the basketball discussion, of course, on a Football Thursday, we're going to discuss basketball on this show. But I want to take that concept and apply it to a few instances in WWE history. A few times when, let's be honest, the windows were wasted. And you never know how long these windows are going to be. Some of these were really defined windows. Some of these were really short runs. The point of is they didn't maximize all the potential that they could have had. And there was an opportunity cost there that was lost. So we're going to go through some of the ones that really stand out to me. And I kept this to WWFE history. And I'll be honest, I kept it for the most part to the last 20 plus years, about 30 years or so. So it doesn't go back to the entirety of wrestling history or WWE history because I'm not a freaking encyclopedia. And most of you young kids don't even know what a freaking encyclopedia is. But I'm going to go through it with you as I see it. Some of the biggest wasted windows in wrestling history. So let's pull up our first wasted window. Now me and the presentation are fighting with each other. Hold on. There I am. And there we go. All right. Let's look at these wasted windows. So the first one I'm going to pull up is the most classic of wasted windows. I think this also just gets tied into the most wasted dream matches in WWF history. And this is where people usually like to start with the conversation. Of course, I'm talking about Ric Flair's run from August of 91 till January of 93. Again, maybe this wasn't the biggest waste of a run. After all, Flair did get the championship. He had a pretty good feud with Savage, and he has one of the most legendary Royal Rumbles and title matches in the history of the company. With that said, I don't care how much retroactive retrospection there's been. I don't care how much retconning there's been of all this. The simple fact that they were unable, regardless of reason and purpose, they were unable to get Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair in a stadium in Indiana at WrestleMania 8 is an absolute travesty. It's a missed window by the truest definition. Why was this so important? This opportunity throughout the 80s seemed like it was never going to come around. You've got the NWA champ and you've got the WWF champ. They're never going to be in alignment. They do very, very different presentations to the public. They're just not in the same company, even though it might be a dream match. It might be what everyone wanted to see for years and years and years. The best wrestler versus the biggest wrestler sells itself. Biggest babyface of all time, biggest heel of all time. Seems like a pretty easy thing to get done. Now, whether it was the chemistry they had at the house shows, whether it was the draw that it was at the house shows, or whether it was what I highly, highly suspect, a certain someone brother probably didn't want to do the JOB. Again, that is just strictly conjecture. And even the discussion of that was probably a little too much to even go past the headache phase. It was announced at one point. It was definitely going to happen, but there was a pivot away from there, and we see the results. Now, when you look at what we got instead, I don't think anyone can argue that that horrible main event with the botch at the end with Sid was preferable to the first ever Hogan and Flair match. Look what it did for WCW a couple months later, and they couldn't competently do anything. This was a missed opportunity. This was a missed window. And looking back at it too, something I didn't realize like throughout the 90s until they started emphasizing it in the late 90s. These guys were up there. Even throughout their prime, these guys were just a little bit older. Pro wrestling got quite a bit younger there for a while. And now I think it's reverted back to where it was in this period. But these guys are old, plus 40-year-old guys. There were only so many opportunities within a major company for them to still both feel as hot as they can feel. Hogan had already cooled off massively by this point as it is. But you can't tell me that this isn't a huge missed opportunity, a huge missed window, especially coming into the seasons that they were in. This is right in the middle of their steroid trial. This is right in the middle of the Ring Boy scandal. This is right in the middle of what you can argue was like the darkest time in WWF history. And they could have had the biggest match ever, but they didn't. All right. Next up on our list of missed windows, Austin Part 1. So we go from Hogan to Austin. We're just going to skip over the whole rest of the 90s. I don't know. Was the Ahmed Johnson window a missed window? Was the Ken Shamrock window a missed window? They had some pretty good success in the late 90s. So I'm gonna kind of skip past the late 90s, but I'll go through the biggest star that WWF had in the late 90s. That was Steve Austin. And as you could probably tell, he's going to be on this list twice. That's why it's listed as Austin Part 1. And for Austin Part 1, I have my time period narrowed down between April of 01, WrestleMania 17, and May of 02, right when he walks out of the company. Now, why is that a miss window? Well, it's a miss window for a few reasons that you could probably deduce from the screen. This time period was the time period, and perhaps the only or one of two time periods, for Steve Austin, Stone Cold Steve Austin, to actually be involved in a ton of dream matches, a ton of major matches. There's a few reasons for this. Well, there's one central reason. The one central reason is WCW went out of business. So initially, you had the influx of the WCW talent, or at least what they were able to bring in. And you had some Austin interaction, and later on, you had a feud with Booker T with the legendary grocery store brawl, one of the greatest moments in SmackDown history. I'm not saying that ironically. I mean that seriously. But you didn't really have a feud with Booker T. You had that little interaction with Taz. You didn't really have anything going on with the ECW guys outside of that. Most of the invasion was spent facing The Undertaker and Kane, which he did like all of 1998 and 1999 and a few other times in between, or he was facing Kurt Angle, a WWF as WWF can be guy. Talk about a from the ground up guy from that era. The only other person that would otherwise qualify would be The Rock, who he had one tag match against in this time period, one tag match with after their big blow off at WrestleMania this year. But the biggest missed opportunity in this one is this is one of two times. And as you can see, a version of it did happen, but in the upper left-hand corner of the screen there, the middle left-hand corner, we actually could have got Austin Hogan. Now, don't get me wrong. In my opinion, Hogan Rock from WrestleMania 18 is the biggest piece of wrestling comfort food I have ever seen. To me, that's the most rewatchable match ever. It's the greatest crowd you've ever seen in the match, and it's not the greatest amount of moves you've ever seen. But what those wrestlers do to that crowd is just pure art to me. I do not think anything that Steve Austin and Hulk Hogan would have done would have matched that. I should clarify that. However, it is insane that you had these guys in the company at the same time over the course of basically 4 pay-per-views, and you couldn't get it done. Granted, they didn't expect Austin to walk out, but some of the reports were that Austin didn't even want the match back in the day, didn't feel like it would be good enough. Now, Austin was obviously in a pretty wild headspace during the entirety of his run, but especially the latter part of his run. But if you put that together, you look at that, this is kind of similar to Cena, even though I think this run was much better than Cena's heel run, but it was wasted on opponents that could have been fresher. Heck, even the initial idea of the heel run didn't quite work out because we never saw, truly outside of one outside of 2 matches and the insurrection or the rebellion show, whatever they called it in 01. We never saw face Rock versus heel Austin, really. And they sang a great song together. We never saw, which I think was the big plan for the next year's WrestleMania, heel Triple H against, it's going to be heel Austin against face Triple H. We didn't get any of those things that we wanted or needed in-house. Benoit and Jericho was a nice change of pace, but the triple threat really didn't work out well. And we didn't get a ton of meaningful interaction with the incoming guys. It was a wasted window. But as I mentioned, this isn't the only time he's going to crop up on this list. Good God, my camera is shaky today. I need to buy some wrenches to tighten up everything on this. The second Austin miss window, which I guess if you wanted to, you could make this an entire miss window, but I do think Austin's walkout is important. There's nothing, even if Austin was with the company and under contract, there's really nothing that anyone could have done with that window while he was gone, while he was away, while he took his ball and go home and went home. But that wasn't quite the end of his career. He was back for a short amount of time. He was back for a couple of months, and looking back, he came back for his retirement match with The Rock, and that was about it. But if you actually go back and read some of the reporting, that didn't seem to be the intention by anyone involved. Austin was there to be a pillar of whatever brand he was going to be on. And then when the health diagnoses really started coming in, for all the reports, Austin really became down, depressed, in the dumps, and the reality of it was that his wrestling career was over. He did have the one more match with Kevin Owens, but that's almost, I kind of look at that as a non-canon match in a lot of ways. And it wasn't even advertised as a match, so you can't even say it was. We missed a ton in this time period too. I think we got him feuding with, did he have a match with Rico, Eric Bischoff, and The Rock? One of those things was not like the other, and the other one he already faced at two WrestleManias. Now, this one wasn't the window. No, but the Cena era basically is in terms of this time period. So I think that qualifies. Now, I don't think there would have ever been a good time for these matches to happen in this time period, but you can think about what was missed. Instead of Goldberg basically getting buried by The Rock in their feud at Backlash. What if you brought in Goldberg a month earlier? I think he was under contract at that point, or at least he was, he was very close. Goldberg and Austin, anyone? I mean, it was cool to see him interact as GM and angry talent, but that's all we got. Now we know about the issue of Austin walking out as a result of being booked in a tournament match to Brock. Now Austin's always maintained that he had no problem doing the job to Brock. He just wanted to be built up as an actual match and not a tournament. When you could have built that up as an actual match, probably WrestleMania 19. Again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have gone with Angle and Brock and you built that match for months and months and months. The show was a historically poor drawing pay-per-view, especially for WrestleManias. However, there was that chance to do there. So these two sort of mythological figures that he missed in that time period. And then you go over, you look at the entirety of the WrestleMania 19 card. It is one of the most stacked cards in terms of talent of all time. The likes of Booker T, Hulk Hogan, Triple H, The Rock, HBK, Vince, Y2J, Eddie, Benoit, Rhino, all those guys on the card. Plenty of matchups. Not all of them fresh, admittedly, from that list. But instead, he ended up with the guy who he had faced at multiple WrestleManias. I guess I made the graphic wrong. It should be Austin Part 2. I have Austin Part 1 twice. Yes, I fail from a proofreading standpoint on that one. That'll be a slap at the wrist. Is that like a fine? They gotta put stuff in the bucket there. 1 second. My water's over there. It went over there and losing the camera. I'll be off of the stream for about 30 seconds. All right. Thanks for holding on. Great contribution there. E says one of the windows is Crime Time never winning gold but Deuce and Domino's did. Yeah, that's a good one. E, I don't know. Obviously, Crime Time should have won the gold because they were like a pillar tag team for over a decade, it felt like. And the amount of love that Deuce and Domino got back then, and by young people who were in their formative wrestling phase back then, is just ridiculous to me. I mean, how over was this freaking SmackDown tag team that really wasn't that important? Amazing. All right, next up, I've got The Rock from March 03 till whenever his contract ended. I want to say early 05, late 04. Do you guys remember this whole saga? You could argue there's other wasted windows with The Rock, but The Rock kind of came and went. So The Rock got, I think The Rock could have done something maybe more constructive at WrestleMania 19, but again, to counter what I said earlier, a third match with Austin, especially when he goes over, and it's tasty. You're going to want that. But every report we've heard that once The Rock went Hollywood, basically, and became a part-timer before he completely detached and divested himself from wrestling, The Rock was interested in doing special things. He was interested in doing dream matches. He didn't seem no longer as interested in just doing the day-to-day stuff. And that's why I have the graphic of Sting up there. You hear all the stories of The Rock pitching to face Sting at WrestleMania 21. There's a story about when he was struggling a little bit in the Goldberg feud, or I should say Goldberg was struggling, that Rock was perhaps suggesting that he would have a match with Rey Mysterio. The Rock wanted to have a match with WCW people. Rock wanted to have matches with people he hadn't worked with. He wanted things to be fresh. Rock saw the potential dream matches out there. Heck, when he came back in 2004, and as Mick Foley writes in his book, The Rock only wanted to come back if it was going to be something major. He viewed Rock and Sock versus Evolution as something major. I think furthermore that he viewed it as his chance to face Ric Flair at a WrestleMania. And as the story goes, and this is very believable and funny in retrospect, the brass at WWE let The Rock's contract expire because they did not have faith in his movie career and figured he would come back. And honestly, they would be in a position of power. No, but that's a good one. Obviously, they were pretty wrong on The Rock's movie career not panning out. Now, they would claim it's an oversight, and The Rock always claimed that he was very mad because no one even called him to note that his contract was coming up. By all indications, The Rock would have negotiated something else new with them going forward, and they would set something up. I think a lot of that explains why The Rock pretended like wrestling didn't exist from about 05 really till his comeback. There'd be little appearances here and there, but The Rock was very much Dwayne Johnson in this era. The Rock would come back for a one-off and he would do the Diva search. He would come back to sign Mick Foley's petition and beat up La Resistance. He'd come back for these little things where he beat up Randy Orton, hung out with Edge a little bit. But there was nothing meaningful. There was no storyline. In fact, at that point, he basically was just a special guest who was around. He would tend to come on screen when they were in Miami, and that was about it. So they wasted what could have been their first. They could have waited. They have this now, where they have a lot younger people considered in their prime, people like Roman Reigns, who they have on this part-time basis to make these really special matches. People forget The Rock was in his like late 20s, early 30s when his main WWE run came to an end. We could have spent a full decade of him probably having pretty decent matches with the regular roster or with these dream matches. And maybe WWE wouldn't have been in such a lull like they were in for so long. A lull that, quite frankly, The Rock did help bring him out of many years later. All right. 2 more, and then we'll get to Thursday Night Football. Next one on this list, I had to put it on there. This one still hurts. Sting's WWE run. I am so glad that Sting got to retire in AEW and seems to be at peace with his retirement, because if this whole stuff that happened in WWE would have defined the end of Sting's career, I don't know what we would have all done with ourselves, because that was just a very, very poor way for his career at the time to end. Think about it. He lost to Triple H. I think he had like a no DQ against Big Show. Did he have 2 matches? And it might have been a tag match that night as well. I don't remember. And then he almost dies against Seth Rollins. And he's forced into, at the time, an early retirement. That was Sting's WWE run. And it got off to a bad start from the top. The top was kind of cool with the Survivor Series thing. JBL recently talked about how stupid he acknowledged that's a picture of Sting was, and that was a line that was fed to him. But we ended up with months and months of feuding with Triple H leading into WrestleMania 32. Now, Triple H being an opponent for Sting, not the craziest thing in the world. I don't take issue with that. Should he have basically been the only opponent for Triple H? No. Should Triple H have beat him in his one and only match to somehow settle the Monday Night War 15 years after the fact or whenever it was? No. But let's be honest. What am I talking about here? The reason why this window is a poorly closed window is look what's on my screen. Yeah, maybe he could have had a match with John Cena. That was always kind of cool. The Rock was in and out at this time. The Rock and Sting was always a dream match that at least I had in my head. But let's face it, this would have been the chance to face The Undertaker. They were on the same freaking WrestleMania, and Bray Wyatt and Triple H were their opponents. Unfreaking believable. And then if you recall, after getting nearly paralyzed in that match against Seth Rollins, the next month, I'm pretty sure it was Brocktober, which meant The Undertaker was back, and The Undertaker did come back at SummerSlam that year. Kind of makes you think that they could have done a lot of Undertaker and Sting. The Perma Dream match that never happened. The window was a lot shorter than some of these other dream matches, but the window was definitely there. And lastly, we have to put it out there. It's Cena's retirement tour. What a wasted window this is. And it comes in 2 phases. There was the heel turn with its interesting start to become very repetitive, for the storyline basically to be dropped, for Cena to do the same thing every week. And let's face it, in terms of opponents, outside of Cody Rhodes, who was the champion, he was basically just on a nostalgia tour of facing everyone he had faced. I didn't expect Cena to work with tons of young guys, but I thought, given that every time he had devoted himself to full-time wrestling in the last few years, it generally had been of quality, not necessarily the matches. And that even maybe goes back a decade to when he was actually having good matches. But you would just think with the care that they had as Cena, with the amount of reverence that they constantly show Cena, that we would have got a better final run out of this thing. And I just can't believe what a waste it was to basically have him back. Like he wasn't full time necessarily like on every show. And we know about the 36 dates or whatever it was, but you knew you had him, and you had him in your canon. You had him around, and this is what they did with him, dropping the R-Truth storyline midway. Again, just kind of rehashing the Punk, the Orton, the AJ, and the Brock matches. Although that I think that AJ match is going to be phenomenal because Cena has proven he still has something in the tank. Maybe not so much against Brock Lesnar. But taking all of that together and taking with the year that WWE has had, it's a really sour note for him to go out on. So I have a feeling that, as I said, the Crown Jewel match will probably be excellent. And then we'll be sort of gearing up for that final Cena match. It's just right around the corner. So I hope they can salvage some part of this window, but I think we've already reached the tipping point. They have wasted this John Cena window. And as we can see with everything we looked at on here, whether it was The Rock making time in his schedule to wrestle, whether it was Sting finally coming over to WCW, whether it was Austin's health and mental well-being kind of failing him, or it was Flair just barely being in the company for a year, these times are limited when you have these things. And no one knows exactly how long these things are going to last. You should probably make the most of your opportunities while you have them because they evolve so quickly. Something could be hot one day and it's not hot the next day, and plans can totally change and everything can blow up. We know and we've seen that happen. So I just hope, as I mentioned earlier, that they put a little bit more effort until the end of this window. And next time they have one of these limited windows, please, for the love of God, WWE, do something other than just resting on your laurels. Thank you for indulging me through the missed windows in WWE history. There's plenty of them. But I was trying to distinguish between like missed windows and missed dream matches, and it was kind of hard. Like I was wondering about putting Goldberg himself on this list because his first run was such a poorly managed run, but I think they booked him against a lot of the right people. It was really how he was just a bad fit, how he came across in the Rock feud and how they booked him against Triple H. And the Triple H feud did consume most of his time. Although I don't know a whole hell of a lot of other people, even if he was, if he was able to work with Austin, that would have been something to salvage. Oh yeah, Tyler, what did Jay Lethal have to say about being Flair's final opponent? That's a good one, E. That's a really good one. Because I'll put that at the top. Bray Wyatt's last run, because he was gone from the company, and when he passed away, you almost forget that he was back with the company because had barely been on TV, and how much of that was health related. But you had like that Mountain Dew match, like that's kind of how it all ended for him. That was the end of the last contributions he had to wrestling, and I think for someone that was so beloved, that was a really poor. I never really saw it in Bray, but the fans did. It seemed like Triple H did, and Vince wasn't even really around at the time. I'd have to think that maybe it was all health related, but I don't know. I really don't know. All right, guys. That was our bite-sized show for this week. This camera is shaking all over the place, and I want to watch some Thursday Night Football. So we're going to go ahead and get on out of here a little bit earlier than normal. I thank you guys for hanging out in my chat. I thank you for contributing. I hope to have another show to you guys next Thursday. I should have a show to you guys next Thursday. Should be the operative word. I have something to do right before the scheduled time to come on, so I think it's going to happen, but I don't know. No guarantees. So I will go ahead and let you guys go. I will talk to you guys next week. hopefully, you guys have a great week. Enjoy the wrestling, and we'll talk about some Crown Jewel headed into next week.